because when I kept serving in the Lord in the church, but at some point the Lord began to speak to me about being a missionary and literally going out into the nation preaching the gospel. I remember the days God spoke to me. I was in university, and it was my first year of university, and I struggled.
What did you study at university?
I have a degree in creative brand communications, specializing in art direction. So basically, I was in the advertising industry. So the previous year, my art skills were not where they need to be in terms of standards. And then I had to take a year out, gap year, where I was working at the church full time, but also at the same time I was doing art, studying art in a sense. And then the following year...
Why did you choose art? Why didn't you choose to be an architect? Or I don't know, what's really was pushing you to go to in terms of art, also the communication and advertisement and everything?
What's interesting is that when I was in high school, I've always known what I wanted to do. I think I've always been a creative, and I've always been given the space to explore that. I think my parents and my mom allowed us to just explore what was inside of us. I come from a creative part. My mom's a creative part, meanwhile. And so when I was in high school, I knew what university I wanted to go to. I knew what I needed to study because I've always had visions. Like I said, I actually believe God had been speaking to me all along through visions, through voice and everything. And so I've always had visions of me directing, cameras, talking, presenting, broadcasting, communication. And I had visions, but I didn't have the vocabulary and I didn't know what it was. And when I found advertising, it had a lot of the things that I wanted to do, entered into that space, and that's how I ended up there. So it was then in uni.
But the main reason to travel to Uganda and to go to live there and was mainly for communication side or
no,
missionary?
for ministry. Because when God spoke to me to be a missionary, at that moment, at that time when I was in university, I was already doing ministry, meanwhile. I was already preaching the gospel everywhere. I was a youth leader, I think at the time. I was a deacon. And I was also preaching in the streets. I would go out and actually preach in the streets and talk to people and pray for people. I was doing that when God spoke to me, meanwhile. And so in around 2016, that's when I started doing international missions, going out, 2016, 2017, that's when I started going out into the nation.